Hey guys, Omar here, and here are my settings for shooting street photography with a Fujifilm camera. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. I'll share my favorite way and then an alternate way if you are shooting street photography. What actually do you need for street photography? Well, it depends on the street photography that you actually do. Let's start with the one that is you're trying to capture moments that are fleeting. So street photography in which you need a fast shutter speed. Second, you need focus. So you need a fast shutter speed to stop action or a faster shutter speed to stop action or movement. And it doesn't have to be that fast. But the one that's even more important is focus. So these are quick grabs that you're trying to do as you walk around. So here are my settings. Number one, I like to control my ISO, so I usually decide on an ISO that I'm going to live with. Depending if it's evening or if it's bright sun, usually if you're doing street photography and you're out, the light won't change too much. So I'll usually pick a shutter speed, like for example, 800. And the reason I pick 800 over the other ones is because that usually gives me the ability to have a faster shutter speed. So I usually pick an ISO. That's one thing I do. Number two, the second thing I do is I will change my aperture to about 5.6. Now, I love dreamy backgrounds and I love to shoot at f2, 1.2, and that has its place in street photography. But if you're trying to get a quick grab and quick focus, well, 5.6 and f8, these two guys give you a nice depth of field, meaning you could focus about 3 feet to 4 feet in front of you, and then most everything else will be in focus. So this is a good way to zone focus, okay? And last but not least, the last one is I usually will just keep an eye on my shutter speed. So if you notice, I'm shooting street photography in kind of a manual mode. As an ode to the, original photographers out there, is I like to shoot in manual depending on what the light is doing. The shutter speed range I stay around is 125, 250, or 500, these three switches. So an example of a quick change, let's say I'm at, f8, ISO 800, 250 of a second, I'm getting everything great, and I see a bicycle coming down. I know I want to stop that action, so I'm going to go to 500th of a second and 1000th of a second. That's 2 full stops of light, so the camera just got darker. So without looking, I can go 1,000 bicycles coming, and I know I need 2 full stops, 1,600, 3,200. So from 800, 1, 2. And that should be the same exposure as I was just at, 250 at 800. Now, something that's easier on other cameras is the amount of clicks. Like for example, in a Canon, you can click 3 times here, and then your ISO will be 3 clicks the other way. This works a little different. You actually have to look down at the numbers. 1,000 is to 3,200, 2 full stops, okay? You can see third stops in ISO here. You cannot see third stops on this dial. You actually, if you're doing third stops, which you probably don't have time to do if a bicycle is coming, you would have to use one of the dials, either the front one or the back one, depending on what you have it set to. Now, why do I want to keep my aperture at f8? If I'm doing street photography, focus and zone focusing is important. Autofocus is great, but you can actually catch stuff quicker if you manually focus. So let's talk about focus mode. So for focus mode, I always have it on the M, on manual, so that I can manually focus the lens, or zone focus, meaning I have it on f8 and it's always focused as I walk around. But if I do need autofocus, you guys know that I love back button focus. This button is always activated and ready in case I want to focus. Autofocus is available to me. This guy will not work because I have it on manual focus. Now here are some alternatives that I don't use. The first one is flat out tell the camera to do everything. You can shoot in an auto mode, and I think this works if it's really bright out and you're just playing around with a film simulation and you want it to take care of everything. You don't really care about ISO too much because it's bright. The ISO will probably be low. The camera, it's bright, it's probably going to pick an aperture like 5.6 anyway. It's not going to give you f2. And the shutters will be high because it's really bright out. So you can actually use A on everything and get great street photography if it's really sunny. You're doing beach street photography. And the other way to do it is to actually control the other two, okay, depending on what you want, and let the camera control an auto ISO. And so now the camera is sort of picking an ISO for you depending on what range you want. And if you go into the camera here and you go into the menu of the camera, you can actually pick an auto ISO range, and you can actually pick the minimum shutter speed you need. Now, the reason I don't love this method is because the camera doesn't listen to you all the time. Like, for example, although I picked a shutter speed of 500th, like I'm doing street photography and I want to stop, people from running away from the cops or something. So now, for example, if I half hold the shutter, let me point the camera forward because it's bright up there. The camera will pick a ISO of 800 and it's keeping my shutter speed, so no problems there. But if the light starts to get a little low, it's going to ignore your 500th of a second. It's already at 70th of a second at f8. So although this method works also in conditions that don't change, I don't love it because, if I go down to the subway or somewhere dark, that guy will not work for me, that auto ISO. Plus, I like to control the amount of grain in my photos. Sometimes I do want photos with a lot of grain for a certain grittiness. I like to pick the ISO. All right, I hope that helped you guys. Give me your street photography tips below and help people out. And that's what we do here. All right, I'll see you guys next time.